Well, good evening, everybody. I'm John OLoughlin, and welcome to my channel. It's called McDuff_2020. And tonight I'm reading from Killing the Planet, How a Financial Cartel Doomed Mankind. But before I get started with the reading tonight, I have to thank a couple of fine gentlemen who've been over here at Mystery Island Studio, helping me set up an entirely new production facility. And we're based now out of a Mac, an iMac that we've set up and added. We're streaming on StreamYard tonight to YouTube, Facebook, Periscope. Is that it for tonight?
That's it.
All right, but we'll be adding other facilities as we can. I wanted to show you a little bit around the studio. First of all, we've got some of my favorite books right here behind me. Over here to my right, though, is a clock. This clock belonged to my great-great-grandparents' family on my mother's side. And it lived up in Dial, Georgia, Blue Ridge, Georgia, to be more precise, where the Tennessee Valley Authority was, when it was created. Unfortunately, they flooded that beautiful homestead, and so they had to move to Atlanta, where my mother grew up. Well, this is the old family clock. It was built in around 1840, I think. And when Andy saw it, he said, I got to put that in a set. So thank you so much to Andy, and also to Dave, who've been over here working about 7 or 8 hours now, and to put this great set together for us to enjoy together. One other item I want to point out to you, and that's the chair that I'm sitting in. You can see to the other way, my left is my dad, a picture of Tom OLoughlin Jr., who is my father. And now I'm going to get up and show you this chair that I'm sitting in. And great camera work. Thank you, Andy. It's so nice to have you here, Andy. He's doing our production and camera work tonight. Well, I want to approach the camera here and show you this picture, because this is a picture of McDuff sitting in this chair. This is a Harvard chair, which he bought when we were at Harvard in 1967. And it was a 25th anniversary of his Harvard class, his graduation. I'll just walk up here to it, because I think I can see where the focal length is. But there is McDuff, my dad, sitting in his Harvard chair in June of 1970 in our family room. So that would have been after a long day's work, and as he often did, he made himself a bowl of cereal, where he sat and enjoyed that before going to bed. So I suppose you can probably imagine what it means to me that these guys came over here and built this beautiful studio for me, and hooked up my Canon camera, so we have a much better quality of video, as well as superb audio set up by Andy once again. And Dave has done so much hard work today, not only just moving stuff out of the way, but putting things together that maybe I didn't know they had a screw loose, and he recognized it and put it back together for me. It's just been a thrilling day for me to have so much generous help. And okay, my producer's telling me, remember to look at the camera. Hello, everybody. Hey, I'm looking. So I'm getting used to enjoying this new space, and I hope you do too. So we set it up tonight for a book reading. I don't know if I'll read a long time tonight, but I do want to spend the time on this very, very important book that I brought in with me tonight, called Killing the Planet, How a Financial Cartel Doomed Mankind. Doomed mankind. That's not good. By Rodney, Howard-Browne, and Paul L. Williams. And I've read 6 selected parts of the book already. I want to let you know that it's very, very valuable to read all of the chapters. We started off with the Cecil Rhodes Roundtable, the Pilgrim Society, then Rockefeller as the Mephistopheles of Cleveland, and how he used Rothschild financing to create his monopolies. We moved on to talk about the loss of liberty, the killing truth was one of the chapters. I skipped the chapter called Killing Undesirables and Killing Innocents because they've been covered so much in the books I've read very recently. So I wanted to tonight, I think I decided to focus on what is actually the conclusion of the book. It's called The Dirge. And let me turn to that page. So, A Dirge. This is chapter 31 of the book. Just adjust my light here and bear with me as I break in our new set here at ScreamingOspreys.com Mystery Island Studio. A Dirge, chapter 31. The only way I look at technology, there's two levels operating at the same time. There's the operational side of it that has to do with things like smart grid, that have to do with things like various technocratic innovations, surveillance, and other big hot button issues for technocracy. These are operational issues. From a strategic point of view, which is where the Rockefeller type people operate, it's a different view of where it's headed. On an operational level, it's headed towards a scientific dictatorship. And you don't have to be a visionary to figure that one out, really, anymore. You don't. It's there. But on a strategic basis, what's happening is that there's a massive resource grab going on all over the planet. And when I say resource grab, you have to put yourself in Rockefeller's shoes, the banker's shoes, and the Rothschild shoes, or whatever, and say, quote, what do you do when money runs out? What do you do when you suck all of the value that you can out of the monetary systems you've created? What's left? Well, you and I don't think about those sort of things because we don't have that much money. But these people at the top, especially the bankers, I'm sure they stay up at night thinking, what's after money? What comes after money? The Rockefeller family especially has always been a resource-intensive family. That's what oil was all about in the first place. It was a resource, and they understood that energy would be the most important factor in the world over any other type of resource. They understood that. That's why they wanted to create a monopoly over energy. Well, today, as money has been sucked dry, the only thing left to do is to make a grab for the resources themselves. And that's what sustainable development, quote unquote, is all about. It's taking the resources of the world away from you and me, away from private companies that aren't part of that clique, and putting them into a global common trust that will be managed by them for their benefit. There is really nothing more than neo-feudalism again, where the resources are owned by a few, and everybody else gets to operate with those resources at their pleasure and discretion. That's a quote from Patrick Wood in his book, How and Why Big Oil Conquered the World, and that was 2017. Pardon me. So how's it going so far? I can't quite see the chat here. What do you say, Andy? Is everybody happy?
Everyone says that you should have a pipe right now to really bring it all together. But you're doing great, and they're loving the new set and the family memorabilia that he has surrounding you, and it really brings it all together well. So they're liking it.
Well, it's great. Thanks very much. And all right, let's keep reading. The master plan of Cecil John Rhodes and his Society of the Elect was a success. Their vision of a world united under the rule of a synarchy, that's Synarchy, an elite and enlightened group of bankers, industrialists, and businessmen who would meet in secret to chart the course of history, was now a reality. They had risen above the masses through good breeding and could not allow their future to be determined by random affairs or the cries from the rabble. Members of the society quickly rose to positions of power and eminence. Lord Reginald Balliol Brett came to serve as Queen Victoria's closest advisor. Lord Archibald Primrose and Arthur James Balfour became British prime ministers. Lord Alfred Milner was appointed the High Commissioner of the Colony of South Africa and later Britain's Secretary of War. Lord Nathan Rothschild, the most powerful member of the society, continued to work with his family in establishing an international banking system. The society proved that a small cadre of powerful men can change the course of world events by instigating the Second Boer War, which resulted in the institution of death camps and the incorporation of the Transvaal and the Orange Free State into the British Empire. After Rhodes died in 1902, a host of other powerful men joined the secret society, including Sir Philip Duncan, Governor-General of South Africa, Philip Henry Carr, the 11th Marquess of Lothian and the British Ambassador to the United States, Baron Robert Henry Brand, Managing Director of the House of Lazard in England, George Geoffrey Dawson, editor of the London Times, John Buchan, the first Baron Tweedsmuir, Governor-General of Canada, T.E. Lawrence, who became known as Lawrence of Arabia, Leo Amory, Britain's colonial secretary, Stanley Baldwin, the first Earl Baldwin of Baldwy, who would serve as Prime Minister of England under 3 monarchs, Sir Edward Peacock, a director of the Bank of England, and Rudyard Kipling, the first English language writer to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature. The American elite. Lord Rothschild became instrumental in establishing a chapter of the Society of the Elect in New York, known as the Pilgrim Society. This group met each month in a private dining room within the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Its members were America's new aristocracy: the Morgans, the Astors, the Vanderbilts, the Schiffs, the Mellons, and the Carnegies. At these meetings, the American pilgrims drafted political and economic policies that would further their mutual interests. At these gatherings was a gaunt figure with a funeral manner and the appearance of Nosferatu, since he suffered from alopecia, a disease that had left him hairless. Reticent by nature, John D. Rockefeller lacked the gregariousness of J.P. Morgan and the social grace of Winston Astor, but he shared a desire for increased wealth, political power, and international expansion. Moreover, he had developed close ties to Jacob Schiff, whose bank had funded his first oil refinery. From this group came the Federal Reserve, which would control America's money supply and its prevailing interest rate. This central bank was privately owned by representatives of the world's leading banking business consortium, the Morgans, Rothschilds, Warburgs, Schiffs, and Rockefellers. These families represented a classic cartel. Through the Federal Reserve, they could join forces to create depression or prosperity. Through the machinations of the Pilgrim Society, Woodrow Wilson ascended to the Oval Office in Washington, D.C., and America entered World War I. In the wake of the war, the Society of the Elect morphed into the Royal Institute of International Affairs, also called the Chatham House. In London, and the Pilgrim Society transformed into the Council of Foreign Relations. The Council of Foreign Affairs, the Pratt House in New York. By this time, John D. Rockefeller Jr. had assumed control of his father's oil business. Unlike his father, Jr. had been educated at proper schools, including Brown, accepted into polite society, and became cosmopolitan in manner and outlook. Pardon me. Junior's generosity. During the 1920s, Junior became a fixture at the Pratt House, where he oversaw the development of position papers on political, social, and economic issues. Eventually, he became the clandestine club's gatekeeper. No one passed through its portals without his approval. Under Junior's direction, the Council on Foreign Relations became the most powerful organization in the country. The true genius of Junior resided in his use of, quote, philanthropies, unquote, to extend his own sphere of power and influence. He shelled out millions to America's leading educational institutions that soon became reliant on his annual gifts to balance their budgets. Junior was ready to open his wallet if the institutions agreed to his demands, which came to include the manner in which they became politically, socially, and religiously indoctrinated. Junior's, quote, generosity was soon extended to legal and medical institutions and organizations, which too became subservient to the demands of his foundations. Through the Council on Foreign Relations, Rockefeller gained control of America's newspapers. What the people read was what Junior wanted them to read. And the events that captured the headlines were the events, in many cases, that had been manufactured or contrived. Pecuniae obediunt omnia. Junior now set his sights on world conquest. He donated the land for the construction of the United Nations and became instrumental in establishing its agenda. With the means of creating a global government in place, Junior went on to place a strategic role in the formation of the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and the World Trade Organization. Several scholars, including Emanuel Josephson, attribute the Rockefellers' lust for world control to their fear of poverty, a fear that plagued John D. Rockefeller Jr. to the end of his days. But perhaps the real reason resides in psychological egoism and the assertion set forth by Herbert Spencer, Sigmund Freud, and Andrew Carnegie that every creature acts to further and protect its own self-interest. After World War II, the Council on Foreign Relations, now headed by David Rockefeller, Jr.'s youngest son, gave rise to the Central Intelligence Agency. The original funding for the CIA came from the Rockefeller Foundation. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, the CIA engaged in operations to safeguard the holdings of the Rockefeller family. These operations came to include the toppling of democratically elected governments in Iran, Guatemala, Brazil, and Chile. From Rhodes to Rockefeller. Realizing, like Rhodes, that the creation of a new world order was not a pipe dream, but a possibility, the Rockefellers perpetuated warfare, mass migration, and the breaking down of borders as a means of destroying nationalism, furthering free trade, and confiscating natural resources. The key to global control was fear. Fear caused by external boogeymen that they propped up from time to time, including Osama bin Laden and Saddam Hussein. But such control also necessitated the creation of internal fear, including reports that the resources of the world were being depleted and that the problem of overpopulation had placed the planet Earth in a meltdown. Global regimentation required monitoring, and monitoring required the surrender of individual rights and liberties. Such a surrender could only be brought about by an enormous catastrophe that would cause people to seek security for themselves and their loved ones. On September 11, 2001, under very mysterious circumstances, Islamic terrorists hijacked 4 American airliners. 2 crashed into the World Trade Center, 1 into the Pentagon in Arlington County, Virginia, and a 4th in a field near a reclaimed coal strip mine in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Fear of another attack led to the Patriot Act of 2001, by which Americans surrendered their freedom of association, freedom of speech, freedom from unreasonable searches, and their right to legal representation and a speedy and public trial for the sake of security. Endless surveillance. After 9/11, monitors were installed on the street corners of every major American city, at the entranceways to schools, workplaces, banks, theaters, and sporting arenas, and within public parks and places of public recreation. No dog could urinate on a fire hydrant, and no rat could emerge from a sewer without being caught on camera. All ports of entry, including bus, train, and plane terminals, were kept under constant surveillance. Few developments could be of great benefit to the money cartel, who were intent upon controlling all human activity. In 1973, David Rockefeller and Zbigniew Brzezinski created the Trilateral Commission with the goal of creating, quote, a new international economic order based on technocracy. Excuse me. In Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technocratic Era, Brzezinski had written, quote, the technocratic era involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled and directed society. Such a society would be dominated by an elite whose claim to political power would rest on allegedly superior science know-how. Unhindered by the restraints of traditional liberal values, this elite would not hesitate to achieve its political ends by using modern techniques for influencing public behavior and keeping society under close surveillance and control. He added, the nation-state as a fundamental unit of man's organized life has ceased to be the principal creative force. International banks and multinational corporations are acting and planning in terms that are far in advance of the political concepts of the nation-state. Trilateralism and technocracy. The Trilateral Commission under Rockefeller and Brzezinski became one of the most powerful organizations on the planet. By 1976, its members included U.S. President Jimmy Carter, Vice President Walter Mondale, Secretary of State Cyrus Vance, Secretary of Defense Harold Brown, Secretary of the Treasury Michael Blumenthal, National Security Advisor Brzezinski, Deputy Secretary of State Warren Christopher, Secretary of Energy James Schlesinger, Ambassador to the UN Andrew Young, World Bank President Robert McNamara, Federal Reserve Chairman Arthur Burns, Time Magazine Editor-in-Chief Hedley Donovan, and former Secretary of State, drumroll, Henry Kissinger. Future trilateral members would be George H.W. Bush, William Jefferson Clinton, Albert Gore, A.W. Clausen, Barbara Conable, James Wolfenson, Paul Wolfowitz, Robert Zoellick, Alexander Haig, George Shultz, Lawrence Eagleburger, Madeleine Albright, Paul Volcker, Alan Greenspan, New York Times columnist Nicholas Kristof, Washington Post columnist David Ignatius, Michael Bloomberg, NBC Foreign Affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell, John Negroponte, and Richard Dick Cheney. I like that, Dick.
That's a lot better.
Excuse me a second while I try to recover. Well, one thing I see, this book is in the way off my dad's picture, but we'll clear that up next time. This is so comfortable, Andy. Thank you so much. Just really, really nice.
You're so very welcome.
Yeah.
Keep trying to save America.
That's what we're doing. It's our business here.
Yeah.
Yep. And it's kind of like the opposite of the book, you know. The book is trying to destroy America, or the Rockefellers, or Rothschilds, the Trilateral Commission. All of these things wouldn't exist if they weren't trying to destroy America.
Yep.
Well,
I'd rather be a part of the OLoughlin, Webb, McDuff gang, you know?
Yeah.
You'd be doing a lot better work.
McDuff lives.
McDuff
lives through you guys and through me and through these great books. All right, let's read a little more. You know, I need to have a studio clock in here too, because I really have no clue.
We do need one. We'll get you one.
Yeah, all right.
I promise.
All right, I'll just keep reading till it's midnight. And
Someone will donate.
I knew you had some kind of a prank you were going to play on me, Andy. All right. Regarding the Rockefeller-Brzezinski organization, Senator Barry Goldwater, in his 1979 book, With No Apologies, wrote, quote, "The Trilateral Commission is international and is intended to be the vehicle for international consolidation of the commercial and banking interests by seizing control of the political government of the United States. The Trilateral Commission represents a skillful, coordinated effort to seize control and consolidate the four centers of power: political, monetary, intellectual, and ecclesiastical. To effect such control and consolidation, the trilaterals under Rockefeller turned to the concept of technocracy that had been in vogue during the Great Depression. As conceived by Howard Scott and M. King Hubbert, technocracy represented an attempt to impose scientific control over all aspects of human society. In their news magazine, The Technocrat, Scott and Hubbert defined their movement. Quote, "Technocracy is the science of social engineering, the scientific operation of the entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population of this continent. For the first time in human history, it will be done as a scientific, technical engineering problem. There will be no place for politics or politicians, finance or financiers, rackets or racketeers. Technocracy states that the method of operating the social mechanism of the North American continent is now mandatory because we have passed from a state of actual scarcity into the present status of potential abundance, in which we are now held to an artificial scarcity forced upon us in order to continue a price system which can distribute goods only by means of a medium of exchange. Technocracy states that price and abundance are incompatible. The greater the abundance, the smaller the price. In a real abundance, there can be no price at all. Only by abandoning the interfering price control and substituting a scientific method of production and distribution can an abundance be achieved. Technocracy will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death. The technate will encompass the entire American continent from Panama to the North Pole, because the natural resources and the natural boundary of this area make it an independent, self-sustaining geographical unit," unquote. A scientific world order. In his Technocracy study course of 1934, Hubbert wrote that the exact conditions would have been developed by global engineers before the scientific control of all human action could take place. These requirements were set forth as follows. A means must be developed to calculate and register all energy usage on a continuous and instantaneous basis. A system must be in place for the provision of a minute-by-minute inventory of all production and consumption. A central registry must be capable of listing all products available for sale, where they were produced, how much energy was expended in their production, and where and when they were sold. A device must be created to gather, quote, specific registration of the consumption of each individual, plus a record and description of the individual, unquote. Once these conditions were met, energy would become the basis of the monetary system. For this reason, all forms of energy would be controlled by a cadre of elite scientists and bankers who would distribute energy certificates, the new money, to nations based on their net energy expenditures. The nations in turn would distribute these certificates in denominations of joules, that is the unit of energy, Joules, to their citizens. The citizens would use the joules to make their purchases. The information about these purchases would be conveyed to the central governing system so that they, in the words of one technocrat, could create a thermodynamically balanced load of production and consumption, thereby doing away with unemployment, debt, and social injustice, unquote. The technocrats believed that it would be possible for manufacturers and industrialists, by monitoring the actions of their employees, to establish work schedules with the goal of uninterrupted production, maximum efficiency, and a sharp rise in profit. According to their calculations, an average factory worker should work 4 hours a day for 4 days and take the rest of the time off. They held that humanism, freedom, and democracy were worthless in a technological civilization since they were not directly indispensable for rationality and efficiency. Why should man, a mere animal composed of atoms, the technocrats argued, need freedom and democracy? Man, they insisted, quote, was an engine taking potential energy and converting it into heat, work, and body tissue. They claimed that while technocracy ruled by engineers and scientists would mean a dictatorship, it would be a dictatorship not of an individual, but of science. From such a system, people should expect only peace and comfort, for this dictatorship would be totally objective and free of any preferences or mistakes. During the 1930s, the technocrats' vision was of a totalitarian society in which every action and interaction of every person on the planet would be watched and reported to a central authority. To those who lived during the Great Depression, this smacked of insanity, since the world remained without the internet and high-speed computers, let alone cell phones and power grids. The Continental Committee on Technocracy collapsed in 1937, and the movement came to an end. W. King Hubbard, however, did not disappear. He accepted a position with Shell Oil. In this way, Hubbard's notion of a technocracy fell into the hands of the Bilderberg Group and ultimately the founders of the Trilateral Commission, who realized that the idea of a scientific dictatorship controlled by a power elite was no longer a pipe dream, but a distinct possibility. Their realization intensified in the remaining decades of the 20th century with the advent of home computers, quantum dots, satellite television, the World Wide Web, test tube babies, the wireless internet, cell phones, nanotechnology, and quantum computing. After the attacks of 9/11, the Internet of Things was brought into being for the sake of, quote, security, unquote. Now, any electric or electronic device can be connected to the internet and with each other. This includes cell phones, televisions, coffee makers, washing machines, lamps, stoves, toasters, and vacuum machines. It also applies to the components of machines, such as the jet engine of an airplane, the drill of an oil rig, the ignition of an automobile. Gartner Research predicts that by 2020, 26 billion devices will be connected and interconnected. In his explanation of the Internet of Things for Forbes magazine, Jacob Morgan writes, quote, "The new rule for the future is going to be anything that can be connected will be connected. But why on earth would you want so many connected devices talking to each other? There are many examples for what this might look like. or what the potential value might be. Say, for example, you're on your way to a meeting. Your car could have access to your calendar and already know the best route to take. If the traffic is heavy, your car might send a text to the other party notifying them that you will be late. What if your alarm clock wakes you up at 6 a.m. and then notifies your coffee maker to start brewing the coffee for you? What if your office equipment knew when it was running low on supplies and automatically reordered more? What if the wearable device you used in the workplace could tell you when and where you were most active and productive and shared that information with other devices that you used while working? Smart houses, in which all appliances are interconnected, will be linked to a central 5G grid. In computer terminology, 5G stands for the fifth generation of mobile technology. The first generation was the original cellular networks of the 1990s. The second, the advent of text messaging. The third, the ability to access the internet on mobile devices. And the fourth, the expansion of speed of internet access. The fifth generation will deliver speeds 200 times faster than the fourth and on a much wider broadband. It will transmit airwaves that can penetrate thicker walls and structures. It will require the erection of radiating towers throughout the globe, adding new meaning to the concept of electromagnetic soup. And share frequencies with the military, meaning that 5G technology is weapons grade, and that microwaves can be deployed as miniature cannons to address any suspicious activity. You know, I do want to stop right there for a second, because when you think of microwaves deployed as mini cannons, and you consider what we studied this morning with Harley Schlanger about Bill Binney and him being under attack, microwave cannons seems like that go through walls, seems like maybe that's exactly what this book is telling us. The smart grid can be used to track people, to disable them, and to see if they are carrying money or a weapon. A law was recently passed in Australia that allows cops to tune into the microchips implanted in appliances, such as refrigerators, and to listen to conversations taking place within private residences. Verizon, the electronics giant, has staked much of its fortune in the creation of 5G technology and will own and operate the smart grids. It is no small surprise that the Rockefellers are principal Verizon shareholders. The dream of their patriarch is to forge a world that would operate under his supervision had finally come to pass. The public health. Even before the 5G rollout, more than 230 scientists from 41 countries expressed their serious concerns about the ubiquitous and increasing exposure to electromagnetic frequencies generated by electric and wireless devices throughout the world. They referred to studies which showed that exposure to EMFs produce increased cancer risk, genetic damages, structural and functional changes of the reproductive system, learning and memory deficits, and neurological disorders. In 2015, the National Toxicology Program conducted a $25 million study which linked 4G cell phone usage to brain and heart cancer in animals. The EUROPAEM EMF Guideline 2016 maintained that long-term exposure to certain EMFs is a risk factor for diseases such as certain cancers, Alzheimer's disease, and male infertility. Despite the fact that 5G met with the approval of the FCC in 2017, no tests were conducted on the health effects that the vastly increased electromagnetic airwaves will have on the general public. The eugenics movement, advanced by John D. Rockefeller Jr., couldn't have imagined that the problem of overpopulation could be solved through airwaves. The digital prison. Within the world of a 5G smart grid, future generations will eke out their existence in a digital prison under constant supervision and control. The information obtained from the monitors in their homes, vehicles and workplaces will be transmitted to insurance companies so that premiums can be readjusted, and to businesses so that new customers can be targeted. It will be conveyed to employers. It will be conveyed to employers the personal beliefs of their employees, and to law enforcement officials so that criminals can be arrested before they commit a crime. It will be sent to the money cartel who own and oversee the new technology so they will be able to access the value of every person's life. It all began with snake oil and the awareness that people remain ready to buy it and drink it, thinking it might improve their well-being. And it came to an end with the preparation of the rise of a one world leader who, in accordance with Scripture, will be the Antichrist. The road to Armageddon has been paved with asphalt. I'm going to leave it right there, folks. I don't know if I could have come up with a more solemn and important warning for everybody tonight in connection with the events of this week, what's going to happen next week, and whether or not President Trump somehow pulls out a win here. It's all on the table right now. And if you haven't yet, get yourself a copy of Killing the Planet by two great writers, Rodney Howard-Browne and Paul L. Williams. And Andy, I think that's all we got for tonight. Is there anything else? Is there a big question from the chat or anything you wanted to?
It's just hard to keep up with reading the chat and listening to you at the same time. But yeah there's definitely
I see a super chat over there. Who's that?
That's Norman Smith.
Norman Smith. All right.
There's definitely a transhumanism war going on, and we need to keep our eyes out for it and be aware that it's coming, and just make sure we're prepared.
Norman, I think I'm going to give you the last word tonight. Technology has outpaced wisdom.
There we go.
And with that, let's have some ospreys, Professor. Thanks again for being with us. Good night.